Happy Tuesday, everybody. Anybody happen to have like a sheet of paper? A sheet of paper. Would you mind like using one for attendance? How many people from computer science do we have? Do you have 2 people from computer science? How many people from bioscience? Anybody from bioscience? Physics? 1, 2 from physics. 3. Mathematics? 1. Geography? Okay. Cool. So welcome to this topic on writing scientific research papers. Has anybody here already written a scientific research paper before? Okay, that's nice. That's good. Did you publish it already? Oh, that's great. That's great. So you're going to find this very interesting. Interesting perspective. How many people are like attempting or starting? Okay, yep. Because you have to publish more than one. Anybody ever wonder, like, why do you have to publish papers? Does anybody ever wonder that? Anybody know the reason why? Why do we have to publish research papers as PhD candidates?
Spread knowledge.
Spread knowledge, yes, that's right.
And for the recognition of the university?
Yep, it increases the university's prestige, that's right. Good answers.
Prove your worth as a scientist.
Yep, demonstrate your, well, another way of saying that is you demonstrate your contribution to science. So you go through an objective process, which is the refereeing process that says you've made a contribution to science. So yeah, this is the way that scientists and science works. You make a contribution to science by publishing research papers, and it's that refereeing process that makes it special and makes it objective. So maybe 4 referees read your paper and say, okay, we agree that this is a contribution to science, like they have expanded the frontiers of knowledge, whoever wrote this manuscript. That's how we all hope what's gonna happen. But most research papers get rejected, actually. We don't talk about that very much, but most of them actually get turned down. But the ones that do get through are an objective contribution to science. It's also very nice for a PhD candidate, because what do you have to do as a PhD candidate? You have to stand in front of 2 examiners at the end of your PhD and defend your thesis. Now, those examiners are 2 kind of people, and they decide whether or not you're awarded a PhD thesis. But you don't really want them to be the ones that have decided whether or not your thesis is a contribution to knowledge. You want that to be demonstrated before your thesis. You want to be able to show the examiners, yes, my thesis, I have made contributions to scientific knowledge. I have contributed to scientific knowledge. You want to be able to prove that, so to speak, to the examiners. You don't want them to have to decide, is this a contribution to science? You want to show them that it is a contribution to science. In computer science, I think of it as putting on a bulletproof vest. You know, if your examiners are shooting at you, you want to have protection. And these are like protection. Look, I've gone through the scientific review process. I know that what I've done is a contribution to science. So it's got that added benefit as well. And that's what we tell students, at least in the visualization group. Does that make any sense? There are some other reasons too. Those aren't the only reasons. another reason is papers are digestible, tend to be digestible. In other words, you can sit down for an hour and read a paper. Theses and books are not so digestible. It's very difficult. In reality, PhD theses are not really read. It's too difficult to read a PhD thesis. It's too time consuming. So knowledge in science is not exchanged generally in these pieces or currency of PhD theses. They're exchanged in the currency of digestible, manageable research papers, because they are manageable. They are usually a manageable size and quantity. Usually. Everything I say is usually. Obviously, there are always going to be exceptions. So we're going to talk about some starting guidelines on how to write research papers. Note that the seminar is not called How to Finish Research Papers. It's How to Start. Right? Because starting guidelines generally do not exist. They generally do not exist. How to finish. I can't give you a seminar on how to finish. I can give you that maybe if you were just specialized in data visualization. But even if you were specialized in data visualization, every research paper has its own ending and its own finish. So really, I couldn't give a seminar on finishing it. I can only give a seminar on how to start the process. And it's too much for one, so we're going to break it up into two pieces, like part one this time and part two next time. I used to try to squeeze it into one, and it was very uncomfortable. So now we're trying something else. We're going to divide it into two and make it a little bit easier and less strenuous. Also, if you have questions or comments, maybe from your own experiences, just interrupt at any time. Make comments, as long as they're constructive. Just interrupt at any time. Yeah. Give a man a fish, you have fed him for today. Teach a man to fish, and you have fed him for a lifetime. That's the spirit behind today's talk. So the guidelines we're going to talk about today are meant to serve as a starting point, right, for anybody that's new, but not just for people that are new. Sometimes you go through a process, and you've gone through a process like writing a research paper, but you still don't even know what that process was that you went through. So it's still, even when you've gone through the process, it's nice to look back and think, oh, did I do that? Or what part could I have done better? Or what part did my supervisor do? And so on, right? And anybody that goes through this process knows it's difficult. So otherwise the seminar wouldn't be very interesting. This is a difficult task. It is the most difficult task of your degrees. It's very difficult to publish papers, generally speaking. The guidelines here are certainly no substitute for a supervisor or anything like that, so that they're meant to complement whatever your supervisor tells you. And we try to break it down section by section, like you have a section that looks like this in your research paper, and this is what could go inside of that section. So we try to break it down section by section with a focus on structure and content. So these are some of the topics that we talk about. We talk about abstracts. Everybody loves writing abstracts. We talk about how to write an introduction. Right? There are strategies for writing an introduction that maybe you didn't know about already. We even talk about paper titles, planning your time. We mention LaTeX, which I won't say what that is yet. We mention related work, how to write your related work section. And then we talk about a method section. This is the section that looks the most different depending on what field you're in. But no matter what field you're in, there is some sort of a method section. We talk about something called enhancements, which are like supplementary material. We talk about something called implementation. Now the terminology is going to change depending on what field you're in, but the themes are all the same. So you might not call you might not have a section in your paper called implementation. You might have a section in your paper called like experimental setup, for example. Results and performance. So every research paper is going to have some sort of results section. Sometimes there'll be a performance aspect, sometimes there won't be. We even talk about supplementary material, movies and supplementary material, and some other topics. The red thread, application papers, conclusions, and future work acknowledgements, proofreading, and references. So all terms that I think you're already familiar with. It's a lot of material, it's a lot of topics actually, which is why we're going to split it up into two. I don't know how far exactly we're going to get today. Probably we'll get something like around here today, maybe. I don't know. I actually don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Now, just a caveat, by the way. A very common question is, which section do you write first when you write a research paper? Does anybody have an opinion on that already? The abstract? What would you say?
The title.
Yep, that's a perfectly valid answer. There are pros and cons for every answer.
Methodology.
Methodology, anybody say anything else? So we have abstract, methodology, and title. Any other suggestions?
Introduction.
Introduction. Any others? They all have positives and negatives. So I have two answers that I like to give. I always used to say the abstract. That was when I first started doing this myself. I always said you should start with the abstract, because if you can't write the abstract, then you don't actually know what the paper's about in the first place that you're about to write. So yes, you might not know how to write an abstract, but it's a good starting point so you can you have to figure out what is that paper actually going to be about. So it is a good starting point, it's a good exercise for starting, but it's not the only starting point. Another good starting point, in my opinion, is the related work section. And that is where you review the previous literature to find out who's done similar work that's related to yours previously. That's also a good starting point. And that's a good starting point because it also helps you discover firstly, what is the related previous work? And secondly, am I sure that what I'm doing is novel? Like, you want to check the previous work to make sure what you're doing is novel. Before you imagine doing it last, that would be horrible, right? And then discovering, oh wow, there's somebody that's already done this, and that's the last thing you're writing. So I changed my answer. I used to say abstract, but now I say related work is a good starting point too. So either one. But one of those I recommend being first, like research section, related work section, and then abstract, or vice versa. They should both be very early. And sometimes when I'm not even 100% sure what the paper's going to turn out like, we'll start writing the related work section just to get the literature. Now, when you write something, you don't write it just from start to finish and you're done. You write a draft, your thoughts, and then you revise it, right? That's always what happens with all the sections. So abstracts, you might never have thought that there's a strategy for writing an abstract, but there are. There are strategies for writing all of the sections, and that's what we're going to try to discuss today and try to talk about. So an abstract can be 6 to 12 sentences. That's just a guess, you know, depending on what your supervisor says, but it's a good start. So you want to address 4 aspects of your research. What it is you're doing. You have to have a statement or 2 about what it is you're doing. You need a statement or 1 to 2 sentences on why you are doing what you're doing. Right? So 1 is what, 2 is why. You have to mention the novelty. So you need at least 2 sentences, 1 to 2 sentences that mention what is novel and new about what you're working on. And this is the last one that I think people forget the most, at least in my experience, the one that slips by the wayside. You need to mention the benefits and advantages that what you're doing brings. So you're doing something, and there's a good reason, like it brings some sort of advantage to the world, like it makes the world a better place somehow. What is it? What are the benefits and advantages that what you're doing has brought to the world? Like, my method makes the world a better place. But it's very typical that what you're doing is somehow faster than what people have done before, or maybe it is more cost efficient than what people have done before. Maybe it's more accurate than something that's anybody's done before. Or maybe you've made some brand new observations and you've discovered some behavior that nobody's discovered before, and why is that good? Now we can save some species from going extinct, for example, or some benefits. So a lot of students don't start with the abstract, at least from what I've seen, because they don't know what to write. Well, have a meeting with your supervisor and say, okay, I want to write this in my abstract. Is it, what do you think? You know, you may as well clear up that confusion right at the beginning, like what is this paper actually going to be about? You know, you may as well do it in the beginning, because you don't want to spend days and days writing some introduction or method section or other section and then have it turn out you have the wrong focus. Right? You may as well settle it right in the abstract. You may as well have a conversation right about the abstract right in the beginning. And the abstract is going to be revised. You know, you draft an abstract and you're going to revise it. I don't know. In our group, probably like 6 times or something like that. The abstract will get revised somehow. So introduction and motivation. So every paper starts off with this introduction. But that's not actually a good word for that first section. It's not good. It's just that everybody puts it there because they're just like acting like a sheep. It's the convention. A better word to think of is motivation. That section after the abstract that's usually called introduction should be called motivation. And in our group, I cross out the word introduction actually. Well, I don't cross it out, but I always add the phrase introduction and motivation. So in your introduction, you want to answer these questions and hit on these points. What is this research topic good for? You have chosen a research topic, a general research direction. Why is it useful, what you've chosen? You have to start out there. And then you have to let the audience know, why is it important? What is the significance of what you're doing? This research topic, the general research topic, before you've gotten into the most specific angle. And by the way, these are in order that they appear in the introduction. So your introduction flows through this list of topics. So like the first sentence of your introduction answers this question, or the first sentences. So the introduction is actually follows this sequence of logic and order. And that's true about every slide, by the way. So these are not randomly ordered bullet points. The flow of your writing follows the bullet points, the flow of the bullet points. After that, you need to present some hypothesis or idea. What is your hypothesis? What is your idea? What are you trying to present? Right? Some people call it a hypothesis, some people call it idea. Sometimes it will be an explicit hypothesis, sometimes it won't. Right? But it just depends on your style of writing and the style of the community you're writing in. And then, after you've got your hypothesis and your idea, you have the novelty, benefits, and advantages of the research are described. So what is novel about your idea? Just like in the abstract, by the way. So there's overlap with the abstract. What are the benefits of that your method brings, your contribution? And the advantages. So whatever you're doing has benefits and it has advantages with respect to the previously published literature. What are those benefits and what are those advantages? And so I will refer to my own group sometimes because that's what I know. I'm very familiar with. In our group, we actually have a bulleted list of contributions. These are also called contributions. So your introduction will have these themes of contributions of your scientific research, the novelty of your scientific research, and the advantages that it brings. So these three words will appear in the introduction. You may as well use those three words very explicitly because the reviewers are going to be looking for them. I don't know if when you get more experience, sometimes you'll get a paperback that says, rejected, not enough novelty. And it's because, oftentimes, it's just because you didn't use that word, novelty. This is the novelty. And right in the introduction, this is the aspect that's novel. You have to make it black and white. In our group, we make it black and white using a bulleted list of contributions, the novel aspects of the work. So that we try not to get rejected just because a reviewer couldn't find the novelty. And then it's very good, not many introductions do this, but it's really, really nice to have a paragraph in the introduction near the end, the second to last paragraph, that mentions the challenges you must overcome in order to achieve the results you got. What were the challenges? You had to overcome some sort of challenge. You had to develop a new method that was either faster for some reason, or more accurate for some reason, or maybe it cost a lot of money, or something like that. But there were definitely barriers and challenges that you had to overcome in order to get that result that you got. It's nice to mention those. It's really, really nice. If you read research papers, most people don't do this, actually. But it's a great, great feature of a great introduction to mention those challenges. What barriers and obstacles did you have to get past in order to get those results? it's a great thing, and it's nice to read too. When you're reading it, it's more like a story. And then the final paragraph of the introduction is just, here's how the rest of the paper is organized. Section 2 is related work. Section 3 is the method section. Section 4 presents our data analysis, and so on. So it gives the reader a preview of what's to come. A little preview. Yeah. And so the best introductions have all of these elements. Does that mean all introductions have those elements? No. But some introductions are better than others, and the best ones have all of these elements in them. Comments or questions about that? So for the people that wrote introductions already, there were a few people. Do you think your introduction had these elements in it?
No.
None of them?
No. Especially the mentioned challenges part.
Yes, this is usually left out.
Yeah, because I've never thought about writing.
Yeah, what are the challenges?
Yeah,
Yeah. But that's the whole interesting aspect. It's kind of ironic. Like, because you have to overcome these challenges. Like, it's very difficult to measure something, or it's very difficult to set up this carefully crafted experiment that gets exactly the control parameters I need. But that's actually the most interesting thing about what we're doing, is what are the challenges that we had to overcome. And that's what has prevented the work from already being published. You know, that's the reason you've done something interesting. So it's kind of ironic. Yeah. But yeah, it's usually not there, actually. What about the other things? Were the other things there?
You mentioned the novelty.
Yeah.
And yeah, the first time I submitted the paper, one of the referees told that
What's the novelty?
what's the novelty, I didn't understand. So
Exactly.
I had to put it there.
Good. Thank you for supporting the. So here are some examples. I do try to provide examples, but you can imagine it's not trivial to provide examples that cover all of science. But we're going to provide examples anyways. So contributions and examples. Each contribution or benefit is identified explicitly in a bulleted list. And here are some examples, like what you want to be thinking of. Does the presented research describe a novel hypothesis or insights of some sort? Right, what's new? Did you discover new patterns? That would be nice. If you discover a new pattern, that's great, by the way. If you discover new behaviors, that's great. Right? Discoveries are great. They're not very common, actually. Or you've generated pictures or images that have never been generated before, that's also very nice. Those are very unusual, actually, but those are great contributions. Does the presented work provide new findings that were not previously published? That's very common, right? Some more very common ones. Does the method or technique result in faster or more accurate results? Lots of research papers are faster versions of previous work or more accurate versions of previous work. That happens a lot of them. So they're not really like brand new discoveries per se, like the first one, like new patterns, behaviors, or images. These are my favorites. But a lot of them end up being just faster, which is also nice. It's nice whenever you take something and make it faster, right? That's a great thing. It's not the world's, well, I don't know, it just depends on the context. But certainly, like, one example that's kind of interesting is email. Like, replacing a handwritten letter with an email is much faster. So it's pretty radical. Now I hate email. Does what you've done cost less than previous approaches? That is a contribution too. If you can take a previous process that cost 20 million pounds and now you can do it for £1, that's a huge contribution. Like, I can do the same thing this guy did, but it only cost me £1. That's a huge contribution. So a lot of papers have a cost factor. A lot of papers publish new results just because new hardware has come out. New hardware has come out, therefore I've purchased the new hardware, I've adapted my technique to use the new hardware, and now I get much faster results. A lot of research papers are based on this premise. So new equipment comes out or hardware comes out, it gets purchased, and then somehow you can accelerate previous processes, make them 2 times faster or 10 times faster, which is a contribution. A lot of papers are based on this premise, which is, by the way, also connected to this one. But the point is, what are your contributions precisely? And if you look at research papers, most of them do not have a bulleted list of contributions. But it's still a very good idea. It's a great idea to have an explicit bulleted list of contributions. So there's no way to miss it. You can't look around it. It's like in your face. You have no choice. Like, what are my contributions? There's no way around it, like for the reader or the writer. So it's good to make them explicit. So a lot of research papers exploit developments in technology, equipment, and software. New developments. Some not random topics, but sort of related topics. Paper titles. Not many people think about paper titles. Somebody mentioned paper title as a starting point. It's not a bad starting point, actually. It's not bad. It's very closely related to the abstract. It should be one of the first things, like related work, abstract, and title.
It might change until the end of the...
Yes, the title might change.
Yeah.
But definitely, if you want, like, the title's got to be one of the first things. It really should be one of the first things. And I find it funny when I'm working on a paper with somebody and they can't think of a title. I know, okay, if they can't think of a title at all, they don't really know what this paper is going to be about. Right? And the title should reflect the contributions somehow. It should be related to the contributions. In the ideal world, the title says everything and you don't even need to read the paper. Like, a faster method for producing blah, blah, blah. Done. Don't even have to read the paper. So, paper titles need to be both descriptive and concise. So, I have a theory. It's not scientifically proven, although I do have scientific evidence, but it's hard to prove, that the best paper titles are 3 words or less. I can see the expression on your face. Now, why is that? And you might think, oh, that's impossible. The reason is simple. It's because if a person can name and identify your paper using 3 words, it's very easy to refer to it in conversation when one scientist talks to another scientist and says, have you read the blah, blah, blah paper? Now, there's a very, very highly cited computer science paper called Marching Cubes, and it's very highly cited because you can refer to it in casual conversation as the Marching Cubes paper. 3 words, the Marching Cubes paper. And because anybody can do that and it's memorable, I can Google the Marching Cubes paper, and there it is. It's very, very easy to communicate with other people, and then the citation rate goes up. Now, for those 3 words, all papers, from my experience, all papers, when discussing them between 2 people, are referred to using 3 words. The Marching Cubes paper. Have you seen the Cooling Jacket paper? Have you seen the blah, blah, blah paper? People always use 3 words. So if you can take 3 nice words and use them as your title, or in your title, the chances of somebody remembering it and talking about it will go up. But imagine, it happens to me too, imagine you're trying to talk to somebody about a paper and they can't remember the title at all. That information is just going to get lost. Like, unless you're sitting in front of a computer, or maybe somebody gets out their phone or something, but usually what happens is that information is just lost. Like, the person listening never gets the paper. The paper's lost in whatever space, attention space, or attention deficit space. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. I know you're thinking 2 things. One, you're thinking, Bob, there are no papers with just 3-word titles. It's true, like, there are very few papers with 3-word titles. But you might also notice the ones that are very highly cited have 3 key nice words that everybody can refer to them by. The second thing you're thinking is, oh, but that's impossible. That's impossible to come up with a 3-word title. It's not impossible because you can use title and then subtitle. So every paper can have a title and a subtitle. But nobody remembers the subtitles. So you can have a subtitle and, yeah, it's good. Have a subtitle that describes your contribution, but everybody's going to forget it. The Marching Cubes paper has a subtitle. It's something like a high-resolution isosurface generation algorithm. Something like that. But I can't remember it. But if I say the Marching Cubes paper, everybody remembers it. And you might even remember conversations with your supervisor where he or she says, you need to read this paper. And they could rattle it off. They might be able to rattle off the magic 3 words that identify the paper, or they get stuck, like, I can't remember the title, I'm going to have to send you the link. Like, one of what the other case is going to happen.
Sorry.
Yep.
Usually what happens with my supervisor or my previous supervisor is that we refer to a paper, say the group of the name, and then the year.
Okay, that's interesting. So they identify a specific research group from, and then they say like 1996.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. How did they remember the years?
No, I remember them.
Yeah, you remember the years?
Yeah, because
So they'll say like Barcelona Group 1996.
yeah.
It does follow the 3-word principle. But yeah, that's interesting. I guess, I don't know, I've never tried to remember the years. But what if the group has published more than 1 paper in that same year?
Yeah, but
What happens then?
related
To what you're
research
doing.
is really
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah,
You must have a really huge group and
yeah, yeah,
then be challenged.
yeah. That's interesting though to hear how other people refer to papers. Which discipline is it again?
Which what?
Are you in
I am
physics?
in the
In the
department.
physics, okay. Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is something to think about, but when you look around, there are so many research papers with very long titles that nobody can remember. So you could say, Bob, you're on drugs, because most of the papers I see have these long titles that nobody can remember, which is true, which is true. You don't have to have a great title to get your paper published. But you do have to have a good title if you want good citations. It certainly helps. And guess what? Most scientific research papers are never cited. It's kind of depressing. They cost a lot of money, but there are millions of papers that have been cited 0 times. 0. Or maybe 1 self-citation. So yeah, there's a counter argument for everything. But a paper with a nice, memorable title that follows that 3-word title, and then descriptive subtitle, has a much higher chance of getting cited. If you can talk to somebody about it and refer to it by its 3-word title, the chances are that it will spread. The chances are higher that it will spread. So the short title and long subtitle. So you can still have a long title plus subtitle, right? So the title is short, and then the subtitle is long and descriptive and reflects the contributions. How much time do we want for writing a research paper? How much time do we want to plan for? In my opinion, and this is I would love to hear like what all the supervisors would say about this, but in my opinion, you need 2 months to write a good research paper. That's my opinion, especially if it's your first one. And that's after you've done your experiment, or done your method, or done your software development, or done whatever, your computation. That's after you've got the results, let's say. You need 2 months of planning just for getting this nicely put on pieces of paper, 8 sides of paper, or 10 pages, or whatever. So that means a long time. Like 2 months is a long time. You cannot just come up to your supervisor and say, oh, there's a deadline in 2 weeks, can we make it? Not if it's your first time. No, you want to plan like good at least 2 months ahead of time. I would love to hear what other supervisors say about that, but at least in computer science, that's for sure reasonable, a 2-month time. Some people will say longer than 2 months. But the more experience you have, the shorter that time can be. Anybody use LaTeX here? So the mathematicians use LaTeX, right? The computer scientists, have you tried LaTeX? And the physicists use LaTeX? Have the geographers ever heard of LaTeX before? You've heard of it? Okay, you guys have never heard of it? Or you have? Never heard of it? Who else do we have? Anybody else? No bioscience here. So the physicists, mathematicians, and computer scientists all use LaTeX. It's a special software package for producing very high quality type manuscripts. So it will look very professional if you use that piece of software. It's free, open source, and anybody can use it. It does have a learning curve, however. It's not something you'd want to. It's something you'd want to learn a little bit each week. You wouldn't want to leave it to the last minute. But it's very high quality. Like the output that is produced by this program is publishable. Like it's very, very good quality. That's why it's so popular. And it's especially popular for people that need to write equations or do anything with mathematics, because the mathematics output is so much higher in LaTeX than anything else. And I had some graphs here. Oh, this is a graph of the median title length and the citations, median citations. So the idea is that the longer the title is, the lower the citations. And the shorter the title is, the higher the citations. That's the idea behind this graph. It's not a black and white relationship, but the implication is a little bit, this way. Shorter titles, higher citations, generally speaking. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions, like this jerk who got a lot of title. But it's a good strategy to aim for. And I don't remember what this one is. I can't remember, actually. Okay, we'll talk about the related work, and then we'll stop. I didn't get as far as I thought I would get. It's nice though to not have to rush. I hated having to rush through the stuff last time. I like being able to babble a little bit about this at my own speed. Related work section is after the introduction. Typically, by the way, that's not true about all fields. And there are some very famous research papers with no related work section that happens. I don't think it's a good idea, and I wouldn't encourage it, but it does happen. Yeah. And the position of the related work section does change depending on what field you're in. But very generally, it's often the second section of a paper. So the related work section is the thing, the property that makes it a scientific research paper. If there was no related work, it would just be an essay. Like, this is the property that makes a scientific paper scientific, the related work section, besides the fact that it goes through a review process. But this is like what makes it gives it that scientific aspect. And then choosing what goes in the related work section and what goes out can be difficult. That's called the scope. What goes in there and what goes out, what is not in there. So that's something that is difficult, and you're going to have to definitely talk to your supervisor, like, should I put this paper in the related work section or not? You're definitely going to have to ask, consult your supervisor on that. And we had a lecture last time, by the way, on how to find the previous lecture, previous related literature. So I refer you to that lecture from last time. It's also archived on YouTube if you missed it. So each paper is described in 2 to 3 sentences. So you try to write a 2 to 3 sentence summary of each related paper on your topic. And in that summary, you need to mention how what you're doing is different from the previous work. You cannot just write, here's all the previous work. You have to mention what is different about your work from the previous work. Like, Joe did this same experiment, however, it took him 2 years, where for us it only takes 2 seconds. You have to make the difference clear between the previous work and whatever it is you are writing.
Sorry.
Yep.
Can we put in the related work what I previously have done?
If it's related, yes. Yes. But probably what you've done previously is related. So you would put it there. I would usually put your own related work at the end of the related work section. Like, we also worked on this area previously, and here is how that previous work, what we did previously, is different to what we're doing now. Yeah. And by the way, some people would say you must put in your previous related work because if a reviewer sees that you haven't, they might get upset. They might think, oh, why aren't they mentioning their own work? Are they trying to publish multiple times, like the same thing? So that's something to avoid. And there is some subjectivity involved in terms of what you write, what to include and what not to include. But it's always good to know that what you include can influence who reviews your paper. So those people that you're citing might get called to review it. So that's good to know. Because like when the person in charge of processing the paper and reviewing it, the lead reviewer, they have to then choose tertiary reviewers. And one way to choose tertiary reviewers is to go through the list of references and say, okay, I need to find some reviewers that are experts in this area to review this paper. So they might go through a list of references to find reviewers. So in other words, who you include in your related work section can influence who reviews your paper. That's good to know. At the beginner level, there's not much you can say or do about that. But when you get more experience, you might think about that. And use names, not just numbers. So don't just refer to everybody as a number. Use their names when you refer to previous work. Those are people you're referring to. And you will make them feel better when they see their name. Imagine, they're going to end up reviewing it. Those people that you cited are going to review it. If you refer to them as a number, they're not going to be happy about that. They want to see their names. You want to make them happy. Like, you want them to give them a good feeling when they're reviewing your paper. Like, if they're in a good mood and they see their name, like, the chances are higher that it's going to get accepted. If they're in a very unhappy mood, then the chances are lower, right? So, may as well use their names, make them happy. And by the way, this is just a side note, most of the previous literature on writing scientific research papers focuses on the negative. In other words, you can Google how to get your scientific research paper rejected, and you get 1 million hits, like all the things you're not supposed to do, right? But it's hard to find, like, the starting point. Okay, but where am I supposed to actually start? Just as a little side note. Okay, I think we're going to stop there. It's already 3 o'clock. Are there any questions or comments? By the way, next month is the so-called 3MT, the College of Science 3MT Heat, the 3-minute thesis competition. I encourage you, as many people as possible, to take part in that competition. It is quite fun. It doesn't sound like much fun, actually. When I first heard about it, I didn't think it was very interesting. But when I went to the event, when I actually attended it the previous 2 or 3 years, I changed my mind completely. I thought this event is totally awesome because you get an overview of what's happening across the university, what people are working on, from all the different departments. And you get an overview very, very quickly. And it turns out that people are working on very, very interesting things that you never would have guessed in a million years. And they're related. Like, people are working on what you're working on, and sometimes there's like direct overlap in the topics from different departments and things like that. So I changed my mind completely. It's a really fun event to attend and witness. And the group of people that ends up presenting there is very enthusiastic, and it's really fun to get an overview of all the different research activities at the university. It's surprising how interesting the collective research is at this university. There's lots of interesting stuff going on. You don't get to see that normally. You are normally sitting in a dark closet, like 20 meters underground, and you're lucky if you see the sunlight. But for this 1 hour of time, you get this magic window into all these different research projects happening across the university that you never would see otherwise. And it's fun. Like, I thought, oh, this is no fun, but I was totally wrong. Like, I was like, wow, there's lots of really great stuff going on here. So I encourage you to think about that. Think about entering. So we'll continue this in 2 seminars. So next month is the 3MT heat, and then in 2 months is the part 2. I like suspense, so that's why. Okay, we can stop there. Happy Tuesday.